Hello everyone and welcome to this month's LGBT History Club. As you know, this is run by the LGBTNI Heritage Project in conjunction with the Linen Hall Library. Our project is collaboration with Here NI, the Rainbow Project and Cara Friend, and you're all most welcome tonight. Tonight we have Nigel Wiltshire, who if you attend our club will know Nigel. He attends very regularly himself and usually asks us all good hard questions, and we have a whole big list ready for him for the end of the evening. Nigel very kindly volunteered, I believe the word is volunteered, Nigel, to do tonight's session, as he was telling us about this great new book he had. So we're going to be looking at phrases and terms used by the LGBT community and some of their origins. I do have to warn you that some of them are quite close to the knuckle and are not meant to offend or upset. And people will give us plenty of trigger warnings before any of the more delicate ones come up. But please just realize that we're trying to have a wee bit of crack and not offend anyone. As always, I will be posting a wee link for our affiliation. So please complete it. Nigel, or sorry, firstly, I'm handing over to Michael, who's going to chair tonight's event. Michael.
Thanks, Mary Ellen. My name's Michael. I'm one of the volunteers with the LGBT Heritage Project. And as Mary Ellen was saying, Nigel's no stranger to us here at LGBT History Club. Just to give you a bit of background info about Nigel, he's 29 years old. He lives in Enniskillen, lovely part of the world. He's a humanist, and he's also a graduate BSc honours from the College of Agriculture, Food and Rural Enterprise. And as Mary Ellen said, Nigel's going to be talking a bit about queer lingo, but we've already had a little touch on the pre-recorded conversation about Polari. So there's so much to language and expressions in the LGBT community. So I know it's going to be a really rich topic. And as Mary Ellen said, if you have any questions, any comments, please put those in the chat and we'll pick up for the discussion afterwards. So Nigel, you're really welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Let me just start to share my screen here. Can everyone hear me okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, fantastic. All right, folks. Hello, my name is Nigel, and thanks to Michael, there's no need for me to introduce myself. Now, I was inspired to write this presentation from a book that I got from a webinar that I got involved with whenever I was in lockdown, and I got involved with an American crowd overseas, and they were based in Queens Astoria in New York. And I'll tell you more about the book very, very soon, but let me continue with the presentation. Also in a custom
Sorry, Nigel, may I just interrupt 1 second? Could I ask everyone to put themselves on mute, please? Thank you. Obviously not you, Nigel.
No, it would be a very odd presentation if I was on mute. But anyway, now, in a custom with the American crowd that I've been involved with, I am obliged to give you a trigger warning, which Mary Ellen has already given you a prescription for. Okay, so let's get started with the presentation here. And all right, then, there we go. Now, I hope I am able to remember all of this as passed by, but I have the book by my side anyway. So here's the introductory presentation. Now, there's an awful lot to cover in this, and I didn't include 100% of it for good reason, because it's a lot. It's a lot of information down here. So here is here's just a little logo. So I'm doing this on behalf and in collaboration with the LGBT Heritage Project and the coordinator, Mary Ellen, and staff. So I'm going to cover verbal and non-verbal communication as much as I can in this context regarding queer lingo. The old and new, so this would be the very first origins of any queer lingo that might have been ever recorded accurately before and not lost to history. The origins included as well. Not everything will have origins because it's just not easy to find it. And also give a summary and questions for the very end of the presentation. So we're going to be doing this in alphabetical order from A to Z. So let's start with the first letter of the alphabet, A. So we have here the first one that I wanted to include was ACE. Now, that symbol there is the ACE flag. ACE is short for asexual in the LGBTQIA plus acronym. So the A would be covered under that acronym, LGBTQIA plus. ACE or asexual means a person who experiences little to no sexual attraction to any other human being. That's exactly what that means. And we also have agender. Now, agender is someone who doesn't particularly identify, especially with binary code, and they do identify as having no gender at all. This is a common description that these people would have in the gender non-conforming and non-binary communities. So this might be an adaptation of how they identify. The next part is an Abigail. Now, I think I may have to cheat and look at my book. An Abigail, if I'm not mistaken, is, I hope I don't have to do this too often. Yes, here we are. A gay, bi, or queer man who is discreet about their sexuality. So this would be part of maybe someone's coming out. If they were privy to the language, then that might be what they are called. Aftercare, this one I do remember. Very simple. This is just a term used for people who are just after having sexual intercourse and the care that comes afterwards. So it's a case of hit, flither and dither, not so much, but it's a case of showing genuine compassion to make sure that your other partner or partners are okay after the deed has been done. An A-list gay. So this is just a reference for people who are queer, but incredibly successful, that they have such tremendous influence that it's just inescapable that they can be catalogued that way. Now, you can see there that there is just a list of about 10 people. I probably can't tell you for the life of me who they are. I can recognize faces, but I can't remember names. And these would be very, very successful individuals in the queer community. Most of them would be probably American, but then again, we have got quite an ever-growing queer community as tolerance increases and more success is easier for our queer community to obtain. Alloromantic. This is just a very simple description, and it means someone who positively experiences romance both in reception and in a pursuit of interest. The other term for this is allosexual, which means someone who is positive in both reception and attraction to sexuality. Now, as I had mentioned before in the previous slide, the opposite to this would be asexual, person who experiences little to no sexual attraction. Ally, we all know this one. This is a person who identifies as straight, and as part of my journey, I suppose I'm sort of breaking the rules by mentioning this. If you don't necessarily identify as straight, but you're definitely not so directly involved in the community, you can still be termed an ally if you are supportive of the community. So what do you call it? Scold me after that if you like, but not all allies are straight, I don't think. Androgynous. Androgynous is just a term that refers to someone who has got both expressive aspects of the sexual spectrum. So this would be someone who expresses both femininity and masculinity. And what's the word I'm looking for? There is no other word. There's just androgynous and androgyny. Those are the only terms mentioned in that. So this can be a combination of both masculinity and femininity expressed into one dress, one expression, or both. It really depends on how people carry it. It turns out to be quite a unique expression. And if you happen to know anyone who's into it, then they can come up with very, very interesting ideas. They really challenge how we perceive things. And that's, for me, definitely very good. And auntie. An auntie is an older, mature man who is expressionfully effeminate. So this would be someone who expresses quite an awful lot of characteristic body language. And these people are very often belonging to the queer male gay or male bisexual community. Anyone who's male, in other words. Now we're moving on to the letter B, a bathhouse. So if this is, there's sort of a mystery around this. Whenever I thought about this, I thought about Turkey, because in Turkey, they take their bathhouses very seriously, and it's usually occupied by male individuals. So in the context of that, it probably wouldn't be too surprising at some point there would be some sort of sexual contact or sexual expressive interest in bathhouses. In the Western society, as far as I'm aware, according to this book, this was a very popular place in the older days whenever there was a venue that you had to go to. And it's more or less in the male community. If you wanted to have a place to go to and have, you know, a potential sexual interest and experience, then you would go to the bathhouse. Here in Northern Ireland, we already have that. It's we call them the gay saunas. Now they're spread out. Most of them would be in Belfast, and they would house the same sort of purpose and facilitations. They have dark rooms as well, so that it's probably just easier to carry out your business. This is one of my favorite ones. I absolutely laughed in hysterics whenever I had seen this. A beer buy. So a beer buy is someone who identifies as straight, but whenever they have a few pints, they start to loosen up and become an awful lot more interested in the same sex as themselves. This is my real favorite one. The other terms for this is what do you call it? A 3-beer queer. It's really funny. I really, really like that one. Another spelling for this is a spaghetti. So if someone is called a spaghetti, it's someone who acts very straight whenever they are not, whenever they are sober, but whenever they are in the environment of maybe a gay bar, they start to really loosen up, and then before you know it, they get all wobbly, and then they start showing an awful lot more interest. BDSM. Now, this is where I definitely have to cheat, because I have a really bad habit of calling the S and M part of that slave and master. And I see, I've already said it, so I'm probably going to get in really big trouble for this, because the American crowd have been very, very good for explaining this very acronym. So BDSM stands for bondage and discipline. Yes, bondage and discipline, dominance and submission. It also means sadism and masochism, and it's just a reference for the exploration of power whenever you are in the presence of people. So the much older term for this is the leather community. This was a community that I'm just going to take a blind stab, that has been around for a very, very long time, and it started to really gain traction and popularity maybe in the 1920s, that they had such a community formed, and they called themselves the leather community because that was just one of the common themes, was the use of tools such as whips and paddles and other tools and devices that could be used for this exploration of sexual power dynamacy. So there we go, BDSM. A bear. So a person who is a bear is a gay man, or just a male identifying person who is rather bulky and hulky by their builds, and they're usually accompanied by hair as well. And that symbol that you see up there is their tribe flag. Yes, in the queer community, we have tribe flags, and they are usually expressed at Pride, or they are expressed in the places where people go to. So there are male-only bars and clubs in Belfast, and probably in a lot of other places very soon. And that means that if there's going to be specifications of this, then we're going to be seeing the expression of tribe flags quite an awful lot more. This is just one of them, and that's the bear tribe flag. So now this is where I did tell you all that there is a trigger warning, because I sort of triggered myself whenever I seen this. The word bent. Now the word bent is a reference for someone who is definitely not straight. So in school, this was definitely my experience, and I heard this word an awful lot being described as someone who was, you know, just not a very good person to be around, or were just extraordinary or weird or offset or perceived to be abnormal. Because what it means is, if it's not bent, if it's not straight, then it's bent. As in, if you're not heterosexual, then you're something else. In the book, it doesn't reference this as being a derogatory term. Over here, I would say it probably would. A Boston marriage. This is where I bring out the book again, because it was to do with some sort of shallow, yes, here we are, right here. It's a dated term for a relationship in which two unmarried women live together long-term without the company of a man. So if I am not mistaken, without reading the rest of it, yes, it is actually a very old term, 1886. And this was probably to do with whenever the presence of a man was almost required as a staple, because back in the 1800s, that is especially the case. It was the old-fashioned binary code, so there was men and women and nothing else, and that meant that if women were by themselves, then that was usually something of an immoral perception or some sort of a stirring that needed to be accompanied by the presence of a man, just to make sure there wasn't anything abnormal going on. So that's what that means, a Boston marriage, the two women living together for a long time, no man involved. This is a really unusual one, but I have to say it's very fun, and I wish we had one of these. Belfast, a bubblegum machine. A bubblegum machine, oh darn it, there goes my book. A bubblegum machine, sorry about that, is an invention actually, and it was an invention by a German fella. And it's right in here, and it's a very, very fun one, because it's a machine that dispenses condoms in the gay scene. So what do you call it? Oh, yes, it's right here. Yes, according to the description here, a man called Julius Fromm invented this. I don't know exactly when this was invented, but that's exactly what it is. It is just a condom dispensing machine. Now, if we had something an awful lot more inclusive, say like a machine that dispenses more than just condoms, maybe some lubricants, then that would be especially inclusive. And having a few of those pop up around the place would definitely be a very good addition, I think. Carrying on with the B, butch, this is an older term. Now, I have seen this be expressed in the book an awful lot more in the lesbian community, it would seem. However, this is an older word. It can be used in both of the gender spectrums. Of course, it really just belongs to anyone who identifies as butch in the first place. This would be someone who has a tough demeanor. And for the lesbian community, this would be maybe a familiar word, because there is an awful lot of toughness that I would personally have seen in the lesbian community itself. And men can be perceived as butch as well, but that's maybe more of a typical norm. It's just not used as much, it seems to be, in the American culture. So here's a good one. Bye, Felicia. Bye, Felicia is an expression of good riddance. I'm so glad that it's all over. And there is an origin to this, and this is where I have to bring out the book again. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it may have been popularized by the, what do you call it? Now I'm probably going to get in big trouble for that, but the ball scene major drag queen, RuPaul. But I do recall that it was actually more tied closely to a film. Yes, here we are here. So it's a term that originated in the Black American culture and is used in the Black, gay, and queer community. And it's been appropriated more or less by the queer community at large. The phrase "Bye Felicia" was first coined by the rapper and actor producer O'Shea Jackson, who was better known as Ice Cube in the popular 1995 film called Friday. So there we are. That's "Bye Felicia." Moving on to the letter C. We have camp. Now, this would be much more familiar to people who have been in the queer community, because, and even people who are outside the queer community, camp just really means someone who is, what was the word I was looking for? Someone who is camp, someone who has a much reduced demeanor than would be expected of their gender. So if you were a man, but you weren't expressing an awful lot of manliness and more of the opposite, then you would be called camp. And this sort of the same would have been said for the likes of women at the time as well. So yes, the definition of it is a spirit of extravagance, irony, and sometimes exaggerated by bad taste. Oh dear. Not quite as English as I had thought of it as to be. A celesbian. So this is just a word mesh. This is a word mesh of the word celebrity and lesbian, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It is a very famous lesbian. That's all. That's all that means. A crossdresser. This is a rather older term, actually that's not an older term, but a crossdresser is someone, it's usually a male who dresses up in female clothes and attire. So this would be a person who's male identifying, and they like to dress up in female clothes. So this would be dresses and frocks and ball gowns and sometimes short skirts, and they would don a wig sometimes as well. The older term for this is a transvestite. However, this is a much more dated term and sometimes is used to cause offense. So probably not best to use the word transvestite, instead just use the word crossdresser. Now, this is a probably very personal one for an awful lot of people, your chosen family. this is exactly what it means. And we sometimes talk about this without having any knowledge of the queer community. I'm sure you all know the saying, you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family. Well, that's more or less what it means. Your chosen family is your family outside of your usual family. So apart from your parents that you are born to, you get to choose who you can spend the rest of your time with. And if they have any, not supplantation, but just the same facilitation of what would be expected in a family setting. So someone to look after you, someone to school you, someone to provide guidance and nurturing. Chosen family. And on a much more individual case, we have your chosen name. This would be a very, very serious topic in the trans community, and especially people who are just keen on their identity in general, because some people like to really take their name seriously. And whenever it comes to the very familiar scenario of whenever someone is very sure that they are born in the wrong body, it's not just the physiological transition that they need to go through, it's also their internal identity as well. And the name is not going to go with what they were assigned at birth either. I'm fairly sure that's usually the case. So that's chosen name, very important thing for an awful lot of people, very important. Cisgender, so this is another related topic, and thanks to our trans community, it's been brought up to the surface an awful lot more often, that we understand it much better. Cisgender just really means the sex that you were assigned at birth, or the gender that you were assigned at birth. So if, like, take myself, I'm cisgender, so I identify as male because that's what I was assigned at birth, and nothing about that has changed very much. Now, this is a very important topic because it has been discussed by one of our members in the community who works in the Rainbow Project, Leo Lardy. The term clean is a reference for a person who has no STDs or STIs. The reason why I caution this word is because, thanks to Leo Lardy, this is a potentially offensive term for people who may be exploring for the very first time or otherwise, and they have an accident and it results in an STD or a STI that they may be carrying for the rest of their lives. The connotations of that means that if they carry this for the rest of their lives, then that means they can be perceived as being unclean, dirty, or filthy for the rest of their lives. Even if it's a resolvable issue and it can be treated, it doesn't matter. So if you are looking to describe yourself as being clean in an alternative context, just say I am free from, or I'm all good. That's all you have to say. The closet, very, very popular word, and it has become very mainstream in the queer community. The closet is a term for a person who is concealing an awful lot about their sexuality that they do not wish for it to come out. This is where we get the term hiding in the closet, or I'm in the closet. And it really means that you have not decided to disclose your sexuality, which you are aware is not part of the heteronormative culture that we still live in nowadays. And the opposite term of this is to come out of the closet, which means you are deciding to take that step to confide in someone and tell them about your sexuality. Continuing with C, clutching my pearls. This is a phrase, and it's used an awful lot in the ball community. So clutching my pearls is a gesture, and it means both positive and negative connotations, and it really depends on how you have the context in. So whenever you say I was clutching my pearls, it's really just an expression of surprise, and it can be good or bad. Now, this is another important one, and I will try and close this as quick as I can because this is an awful lot of information. Coercive surgical gender reassignment. Because of the rather upsetting news and developments that have happened over in Westminster, which means that unfortunately our trans community is incredibly vulnerable now to the amendments to be made to conversion therapy or the anti-conversion therapy bill. So the reason why this is important is because we are going to be talking about this an awful lot more often now that our trans folks and their rights are going to be made vulnerable all the more over again. Coercive, exactly what it sounds like. It's as plain and as dastardly as it sounds, where someone is coaxed into or convinced that they must reassign their gender because it is not suiting the needs of someone other than themselves. This happens quite a lot in the juvenile area. What I mean by that is this is a common thing that happens to children. I'm talking about the parents that would be involved, and usually for religious reasons, this would involve intersex children. And thanks to another member of our community, they explained how incredibly difficult this was. Because if you are a person who is born intersex for whatever conditional reasons, because the human body is like that, it throws an awful lot of things that we don't understand in our face. But in the eyes of a surgeon, they may be able to see that there's something that is not quite formed right, and they will consult with the parents to have surgery performed as soon as possible. And that means that it can be perceived as coercive, but it doesn't mean that it was necessary, because an awful lot of people who are born intersex can grow absolutely fine without having any surgery. And of course, because they are children, that means they're not able to give consent. This can be extended to another aspect that has happened in Western society that we have tried to deal with, but an awful lot of us are rather coy about it. And that is circumcision that is performed on younger boys, and the similar procedure that's performed on girls as well. We would probably know this better as female genital mutilation. Another thing that I had seen was a tradition that was practiced in Cameroon in Africa, and it is a rather serious one, where it's a very very old-fashioned method, where they are convinced in their culture that if a young girl has breasts that grow too quickly, then they will attract the attention of men also too quickly. So they try and bind the breasts. Now, some will resort to very, very harsh methods, such as heating up a stone or a rock. And what they do is, the term is called breast ironing. And they will place this very hot stone on these young girls' breasts to try and stop the breasts from growing too quickly by scalding them, in other words. So that's a very interesting cultural insight from just this one term, coercive surgical gender assignment. And now to a very comforting one, consent. We have had to remind ourselves an awful lot that whenever it comes to sexual relations between anybody, that consent is always the first thing that should come to pass, because without consent, we don't have any real respect ongoing. Consent has been talked about an awful lot more, and thanks to the introduction of sex education, this has especially been put back up to the top where it belongs, because we here in the UK, we have probably still the highest rate of teenage pregnancy. So that's especially very important why consent is necessary. Now we move on to the letter D. So a daddy, this is actually quite a broad term. A daddy is a person who figuratively and maybe even by role has been able to fulfill out the role of a father. So a father is a person who provides to the younger, and usually in this is largely in the male community, a person who is younger can be adopted by the daddy, and if they accept the term the daddy, then that means that the daddy looks after the younger. And there are opposites to this. So a daddy is the male, and the female is the mommy, but that's spelled with an I, M-O-M-M-I. That's a mommy. So this is a person who is expressively feminine or identifies as female. Their term for this being a parent. It doesn't mean that they have to be a direct relation. They don't have to be, you know, father and son, or mother and daughter, or mother and son. It's just a matter of, are they fulfilling the role? And that's called a mommy. The neuter of this is called a zaddy. That's just a Z, Z-A-D-D-Y. Demi. So Demi is quite a series actually, and it deserves more exploration because I fit into this category as well. Demi is not a particular word, it's just a prefix and it's attached to a few other words. So if I recall properly, a demisexual is one of them. So a demisexual is a person who identifies as experiencing sexual attraction only after an emotional connection has been made with the person or persons. That's what a demisexual is. Demi-romantic is a person who experiences might have actually made that one up, I'm not sure, but that would strike me as a person who experiences romantic attraction only after a sexual connection. But I'll have to give that one a very strong review I'm convinced that I definitely made that one up. Another one is the gender spectrum. So we have demigender. So the demigender spectrum involves people who identify only partially in the aspects of male and female, or gender non-conforming and non-binary. So a demi-boy or demi-man is a person who only partially identifies as being male. And the opposite of that, of course, is a demi-girl or a demi-woman. So the dip dive. This is a photograph that I took of one of our local drag queens at a concert in Belfast. A dip dive is a move or a action taken by someone, anybody at all, and that's whenever they take a dive. There's multiple ways that they can do this. They can have one leg up in the air in front of them, or they can have both legs right behind them as they dive in. Now, I'm not going to mention their name because I don't know the name, and I'm going to get in a lot of trouble if I try. But this drag act that we have here on stage, this is whenever they did a dip dive. So this is whenever they leap into the air, however they like, and they land either in a split or they just land right on their back. And that is a very dramatic action that people really like to enjoy. It's usually part of the drag culture. A diva is a person who is unapologetically themselves, and they will not stop even whenever they are consulted or told to stop. That's more or less what it means. A renowned diva would probably be Tina Turner. Tina Turner I used to listen to a lot whenever I was a young child, and they were very much regarded as a diva. They were loud, they were boisterous, they were a fantastic singer, they loved their dress, they loved their life, and they never ever apologized for that. A diva can be ascribed to anybody, male, female, or otherwise. So this is a very sad one that we have here. This is a dishonorable discharge. A dishonorable discharge, folks, is whenever a person in the armed forces, or probably anyone to an extent for that matter, has been discredited and discharged from their service in the army. This is largely in the United States Army, and another word for this is a Donald Duck. That is a very sad phenomenon, because it means that people who are trained and go through all of the rigorous training that any other soldier does gets disregarded, and they are not allowed to return to the service again. A drag, another photograph I got, a drag. I really shouldn't have said that. I got carried away there. Drag is just another prefix. So a drag queen is what I really should have said. A drag is whenever something is bad. These folks are definitely not bad, because I would especially get into a lot of trouble for that. This is a photograph from the same concert of the 3 local drags of just a few others that were on the stage. And a drag, we can have quite a few things involved in this. So a drag queen is a person who identifies as male or identifies as man, doesn't matter about their sexuality, and they like to dress up in female attire for presentation, show, and entertainment. The opposite of this is a drag king, which we can also see in that photograph. The last photograph there, the largest one, if you look to the right, that is one of our drag queens, or sorry, drag kings. They are female and they dress up in male attire, and they do the very same thing. They present and they entertain, either as a living or as an interest, but you do need an audience to do it. Moving on to the letter E, a very, very important word, equality. So this has been quite the pursuit in our LGBTQIA+ community, because it has been rooted in the very strongest cause that we had in the first place. I'm sure that everyone is aware of the word and phenomenon Stonewall, because that's exactly what it was for. It was to do with a resistance and rebellion of complete mistreatment and inequality. And this is exactly why it's mentioned here in this presentation. It's also included in the book that I have as well. And this is a pursuit of making sure that everyone is included and not everyone is left behind. So this would, an example of this would be marriage equality. So whenever the bill was passed in, oh gosh, I'm absolutely going to fail at this, in 2012, that was the very famous one in the United States, whenever marriage equality was passed, and people in the queer community were allowed to legally marry without federal interference. That was an example of equality and an outcome. Erasure, not such a cheery term. Erasure has been much a part of the queer community as equality has. Erasure is usually an external drive where people who are not part of the community try to destroy evidence, culture, even names of people who exist within the community. We have an awful lot of terms related to this. We have bi erasure. So this is people who are very convinced that they don't need to take people who are bisexual very seriously and would hold them at the bottom of the list, not work up on the studies, not bother trying to investigate what the term means or even get engaged with people. That would be an example of bi erasure. Trans erasure is another one that would be probably a stronger term. We see it happen an awful lot. In recent years, we would see this as trying to take hold of the narrative. This is what we've seen an awful lot of, people steering at the trans conversation in a direction that we didn't want it to go to, because whenever you steer it off in the wrong direction, it means that we're not talking about what we should be. So that's an example of trans erasure, but erasure in general is definitely very much the case. An eyeball queen. So this is just another term for a voyeur, I could more or less say, but it could also be ascribed to people who just really enjoy being in the presence of other people who are having sexual intercourse with other people. So this is a watcher, in other words. This is another term for this is also a peer queer. So this is a person who just likes to look an awful lot. Yes. So we have a familiar term with that. So that's voyeur. Moving on to F now. So this is a trigger warning, I'm fairly sure, if I remember. Yes, there we go. So here we go, folks. We got there, didn't we? The term faggot. The term faggot has been around for quite a bit of time, and I'll probably have to cheat again because most recognizably, it was used as an insult or a slur, and that definitely did carry an awful lot of weight, because whenever you are queer, you definitely don't have an awful lot of friends, and usually it's the insults that come first. Yes, here we are here. So the first use of the word faggots was in the American English slang, goes back to 1914, but it was popularized by the Black culture of New York during the 1920s and 30s. Many people referred to the popular Hamilton Lodge Ball as the faggots ball. So I can imagine this is, I don't know why they use that term, but I may be able to imagine it as whenever the ball was present and ongoing, sometimes what would happen is an awful lot of people would go outside for a smoke, and this is whenever they had gotten first observed, and people would have started to talk like there's the gay smokers, because that's whenever they had went out to get their cigarettes after the ball was over. I may be going off on this a little bit too much, and the reason why I'm saying that is because of our miscommunications that we have sometimes with our American counterparts, because here in Ireland we have two shortened words for the word cigarette, and one of them is fag. Fag is also a shortened term for the word faggot, as in the offensive term. If you wanted to refer to a gay man, yes, fag is a shortened term for that. But we also say fag as in cigarette. So if you ever hear the phrase "give me a fag" or "it gives a fag," as we would say up here in Ulster, "gives a fag," that just really means cigarette. This does have stronger stronger holdalls over. I'm really messing up my words today. It does have stronger ties. And the reason why I say this is if you look down there at the bottom right, that picture there called Mr. Brains, this is actually a legitimate product. So a faggot is just really a meatball or a meat sausage. That's what a faggot is. That's another term. And this is where we're going to get as low as we can go, because the lit cigarette that you see down there is very, very symbolic of a very, very sad and very cruel phenomenon that happened also in the Americas, North America, I should say. Whenever the KKK was very, very prominent, being with their mantra, and their mantra was to be anti-Black, anti-gay, and nowadays they're anti-communist. One of the pastimes that they had was executing people that they didn't like. So if they happened to have captured a person who they knew was gay or even suspected was gay, one of the methods that they used, and I only seen this on TikTok, this is how I would know of this, so I don't know if it's true or not, but it wouldn't surprise me if it did, because the KKK are a cruel bunch. If they captured someone who they thought was gay, or even anyone who they didn't like at all, one of the methods to execute them was they rolled them up in a carpet and they lit one end and they just let them burn to pieces. And sometimes they would say, look, it almost looks like a faggot, doesn't it? As in a cigarette. That's what it looks like. A rolled up carpet looks like a cigarette. So there we go. There's some of our dark history for you. Continuing with F, fab. Fab is just a shortened term for fabulous. And very often that would be expressively used by a lot of people whenever they're in a good mood usually, or they see something that they like. A fairy is a person who has been described, usually who is male, who is very light on their toes and also light on their mood. So a person who can be affected by the environment very easily. Fairy. Family. So this is a offshoot of the original. So I mentioned your chosen family. So this would be the it has two meanings. This family is the family that you are born with. Family also means the LGBT family at large. So that's the two terms that it means. So whenever you hear family, that's that can also be used as a reference. So if you are in the gay community and someone who is a stranger happens to move in and you don't know them, but someone just confides in you, it's okay, they're a member of the family. That it really just means that they're queer. That's all that means. This is a really funny one, a funny bellhop. A funny bellhop is a person usually who is male, who and who is queer, who works in the catering industry. So that's a very funny one. A faux queen. So a faux queen is, according to the book, I find this quite strange. A faux queen is a female who dresses up in extravagant and luscious dresses. Also likened with the drag culture, this would be for entertainment purposes, either professionally or otherwise. But the key here is that they have very, very high quality gear to wear at all times. A faux queen. Now, this is another important one because it was mentioned before whenever we were ever talking about the trans community at large. So female to male is, or FTM, is just a transition that members of the trans community go through. So this would be people who have been assigned female at birth, or AFAB, which is probably the more correct term to use. And they have been on their journey and have completed their journey to transitioning to the gender that they like. In this case, it would be male. The opposite of this is, of course, MTF, or male to female. But the real terms that we should be using here, even though it's sometimes not taken so seriously, is AFAB, assigned female at birth. And of course, the other one to that is assigned male at birth, AMAB. So those are the terms to remember, because we may not be using this term anymore. Continuing with F, we have flannel. Flannel is a check or tartan top, and this, according to the book, has largely been adopted as a symbol in an attire symbol for the lesbian community. So it's a very popular garment, and it seems to be more or less colloquially used within the lesbian community. It's very popular. A flower. So this has two meanings, and it also has a third meaning here in Ireland. So a flower is a person who is queer and usually young and delicate, a very sensitive individual. A flower can also be a reference to the female genitalia as well. Now, in Ireland, I'm fairly sure, because I've been called a flower before, not because I was queer, but because I'm very aware that a lot of people just like to express affection for people who they really care about, especially if they are in need of care. They would just call them a flower, you know, like, how are you, my wee flower? That's fairly common in Ireland. This is a very, very expected one, friend of Dorothy. Friend of Dorothy, this goes back quite a bit. So from the film The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy and the Yellow Brick Road, the friend of Dorothy phrase was used to refer to someone who was in the queer community. This was especially in the older times, because whenever this film was originally released, I can't remember whenever it was, but it was very, very popular within the queer community. And then they adopted the term, are you a friend of Dorothy? And that was whenever the phrase was adopted. Or if you were to be confident that someone would know what you're talking about, then they would try and warn you to say, look, maybe you shouldn't, maybe not do that because they're a friend of Dorothy, because there was an awful lot of misunderstandings whenever it came to the queer community. That is more or less the explanation behind Friend of Dorothy. It's just, it was very popular, and then it was used as a phrase. It's also a form of polari, because it was an indirect way of disclosing information, as in disclosing if a person was gay or if you were gay yourself. So here's another possibly offensive term, fruit, but there's an awful lot more impressive words in here. regarding fruit. So a fruit is just another reference for a gay man, usually a gay man. And in contrast to this, we have got extensions of this word. So we have a fruit picker. This is a person who is interested in trying to find people who are gay or queer. And a fruit basket is someone who tries to gather up names of people who would be in the male scene usually. And they would be called a fruit picker because they check out an awful lot of the other people very quickly and quite simultaneously. And a person who likes to spend an awful lot of time in the company of queer people, usually male queer people. So if a person was straight and they like to spend time in the company of other males but who are gay, then they are called a fruit fly, as in a fly that buzzes around all the time because they really like fruit. Full spectrum. So this is a very important term, and this is to do with as inclusive as it can get. A full spectrum is a community that has everything under the sky, under the rainbow, under the umbrella. So this would be culture, religion, ethnicity, especially language, and sometimes even business and industry. So this would be people involved in a lot of different industries who are involved in who are also part of the queer community. So that's what full spectrum means. It's a very, very, very broad term because it involves an awful lot of things. So this can involve a lot of people who have been involved in lots of different trades over the years, and people who are from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, as mentioned before. That's what full spectrum means. Really, really big term. So this is a big one because it has got a lot of words. Moving on to the letter G, we have gay. So a gay-bee or a gay bi is just a young person who is in the queer community. The term gay baby or baby gay can also be used. That's all that means. The gayborhood. The gayborhood is a reference for a street or a particular place in a town or district or area that is almost exclusively committed to the queer community or is operable within the queer community or employs lots of queer people. Here in Belfast, I think it's called University Street, but I probably got that wrong. We sort of have a gayborhood where we have an awful lot of bars and clubs, mostly bars and clubs in Belfast. That would be sort of our gayborhood, but if we had an awful lot of improvement, we could definitely call it a gayborhood. So a gay dad. Now this has got sort of two meanings. So a gay dad is, yes, literally, quite literally, a father who is queer. So they could be bisexual, they could be homosexual, and they are also a parent to children, either adopted or otherwise. A gay dad can also be rather affectionately termed by the child themselves. So if the child is queer, but say the parent is not, then they can even affectionately call their father my gay dad. So that's all that means. And a gay dad just means a person who is very supportive of the queer community, especially queer children, if they happen to be looking after them especially. Gay for pay. I got a wee bit of a mixed reaction to this. My first introduction from this very phrase was actually in the porn industry, whenever I was watching a show called The Sex Education Show. Gay for pay in the porn industry was really just a reference for anyone who was male or female and had to play a role in the scene or industry, and it involved other porn actors, other porn participants who were of the same gender, but they still needed to carry out their roles. And that term was called gay for pay or cock for cash in the male community. But gay for pay, according to this book, does mean something different. That is referring to the theater. So in the media industry, so that would be movies, magazines, and anything that would involve media. If a person is actually straight, but they portray themselves as gay, like what is it? We had sort of a small debate about that on television. We've seen one actually on Pride. Pride no, sorry, it's a sin. It's a sin because not all the participants in there, all the actresses, actors, or however they identify, were necessarily part of the queer community, and that just prompted people to talk about that a little bit. And this is where we get the phrase from gay for pay. So a person who is straight, but they are portraying themselves as gay just to fulfill the part of the industry or just to get money. That's all that means. A gay icon. A gay icon, exactly what it sounds like. So this would be in line with a celesbian. So this is someone who is a celebrity or is just famous in some way, who are part of the queer community. The term bicon for people who are bisexual, who are also iconic or famous or legendary, can be applied to that. A dicon, so this would be a much older term indeed. A dyke is just an older term for, usually it was used in the first place as a derogatory remark for anyone who was lesbian, but a dicon has since been reclaimed by the lesbian community for referencing people, in this case a dicon, for someone who is lesbian and famous or iconic. Gay literature, we did this not too long ago, Mary Ellen, I'm sure you'll remember. This is just what it sounds like. It really does exactly what it says in the tin. This is anything to do with covering gay literature or anything queer, so it can have anything to do with the queer community involved in its literature. It can be written by people who were queer. That's what it means. Continuing with G, we have gal pal. Gal pal is a person who is usually male and has a straight friend. In this case, it would be female, and they would be coining themselves, or their counterpart, their straight female counterpart, would coin their gay friend as their gal pal, and that's all that meant. Sometimes it even meant gay best friends. That's what that means. We have gender now. So this is another big topic. I can only cover it a little bit because I'm aware that we have an awful lot of more time to cover. A gender is your identity of how you identify your gender. So a gender identity, we have got lots and lots of different terms. We have the male gender, we have the female gender, we have gender non-conforming people, we have people who identify as non-binary. What do you call it? I did put in there the gender bend. So gender bend is whenever you flip the expression of how something is expressed in the gender area. So I recall on one of the webinars from the American crowd, a Comic-Con, they took, what was the character called? Duffman from The Simpsons, that big hulky fella who always carried around the beard. They gender bent that on by these two gals decided to gender bend that, and they dressed up as Duffman. So they weren't exactly buff gals, but they were definitely dressed in the same sort of attire. They had the waist belt with all the beers on it. They were carrying the beers as well. They really nailed the appearance, I would have to say. This is a offensive term. This term used and it is directed at the bisexual female community. So a person who is bisexual and female identifying sometimes would have had the term grafted to them or given to them, Gillette blade, which really just means that their sexuality cuts both ways. It's derogatory because it was used to bring people down who were bisexual but female. And how that brought them down is usually that it resulted in a consequence of some sort, that they just can't have things both ways. It was just a reinforcer that, pick a side already, do you like men or do you like women? And that's exactly why it was derogatory. So we have a gym rat or a gym bunny. This is a person in the queer community who spends an awful lot of time in the gym. It can be for any reason. It's usually to do with training or exercise, or even if it's just to mingle with people, they would be termed a gym rat or a gym bunny. So that's a fun one. A gamer. This is a holdover from the term gay. So again, I'm sure you all know the gaming industry is a very, very big industry. It's very, very prosperous, and naturally, because it attracts a lot of people, it also attracts a lot of people who are queer. And in the gaming industry, especially on YouTube, we have an awful lot of people who would identify as being members of the queer community, and they are very, very good gamers. They spend an awful lot of time gaming, and one of the most well-known activities they would do is just they would organize time to spend with other people. Doesn't necessarily matter if they're straight or not, and they would have lots of gaming sessions with them as a form of bonding. So here's a very, very big one, the handkerchief code. This is a form of language called flagging. The handkerchief code, I'm going to try and cover this as best as I possibly can. The handkerchief code originates a very long time ago in America, whenever the people had foundations and they were trying to make a living for themselves. What this usually entailed is that whenever they had to move somewhere, as a way of trying to cut costs, because moving the whole family was expensive, and this was long before any establishment of the queer community, was that they would just leave the mother and children behind, and only the men would move to the place where there was work, so they wouldn't have to worry about anything else. They sometimes felt like as if they weren't quite getting stimulated it enough, and they wanted to participate in the mingling part, and that was dancing. Now, back in those days, it was very stringent who you were dancing with, and that was flagged as something immoral. So an adaptation of this was to do with the handkerchief. The handkerchief code really refers to who's playing the role and who's receiving the role. So we would know this as the phenomenon requires you to wear a handkerchief in your back pocket. And if you were the lead, as in if you were leading the dance, then you would wear it in your left. But if you were playing the female part and you were receiving the dance, then you would wear the handkerchief in your right back pocket. That's where we get the recognition of this flagging language. Left meant active and right meant passive. Now, it has adopted quite a lot. We've been utilizing an awful lot more colors. It's not really a used language anymore, and some people just do it either for the sake of just trying to remember history. I do think that it's a nice way of remembering things. There's lots of different colors in there, and there is a full handkerchief code, which I cannot cover because I've already been passing enough time. But this is one of the earliest languages that was used just to try and keep people safe from the persecution of others, and it was just to try and enjoy themselves as well, because they did this just to try and facilitate dancing, because whenever you're working in the mines or whatever, you have got an awful lot of work to do, and you need to blow off steam somehow. So if dancing was one way of doing it and they had to make adoptions, well, that's exactly what they came up with. Continuing with H, we have hawks. So hawks, or another term for this is a chicken chaser, is a older man or woman who is also queer, and they have interest in younger members of the community. And the younger members of the community would, to the opposite of chicken chaser, would be known as chickens or chicks sometimes. Hetero is a, if I'm not mistaken, is it's either Greek or Latin, and this just means opposite. Now, it's a prefix word, and we would involve our understanding of this would involve the culture that we have been brought to try and mold ourselves into without any great consequence, because this is part of the binary code, where people are, hold on, no, it's actually not part of the binary code, but the prefix of this would be heterosexual. So if you are a person, or a person who you know would be heterosexual, that means that they are sexually attracted to the opposite gender of themselves. If I was heterosexual, I would be attracted to my female counterparts. So anyone who's female identifying or would describe themselves as a woman, then that would be the outcome met. So that's what hetero means. Hetero just means opposite. That's all it means. The symbol that you see down there is a representation of people who are heterosexual. It's just a black and white horizontal flag. That's it. This is a very interesting one, and I have to say it's very enlightening to see how different cultures around the world have respected this. Hijra, which is a unique term to some communities in India, really just means third gender. That's all that means, and it is a recognized and protected identity in an awful lot of cultures. Hijra is, if I can remember the story of it, Hijra are actually very, very much respected and revered individuals. If they are recognized as Hijra, then they would even have been brought or sought after to be taken to weddings, which in the culture of India would be seen as a blessing, because it's facilitated and witnessed by a person who is Hijra or third gender. In Japan, I did put a reference in there, and I completely ran out of time covering it. But in the Japanese samurai culture in the olden days, they did have a perceived difference of gender. It wasn't binary like we had it, and it was to do with how you aged. So if you were a young individual boy, then you were described in a different way to what we would understand as a boy. So it would be a person who was almost third gender. Japan did have its third gender once upon a time, maybe even it still does. In the Maori culture in New Zealand, they have, there was a documentary I had seen, and I have to say I absolutely leapt with joy and wept with tears whenever I had seen it, because it was to do with their respect for the excuse me, for the third gender in their Maori culture. In In the documentary, they described the unique word as takatapui, which means a person who is of third gender, and it's also usually in the female realm that this is applied. I may be mistaken though. What the word takatapui and the early carvings of Maori language that they had found in older settlements on the island had revealed that they took the recognition of people's gender quite seriously, and that was also included in if you were born intersex or third gender, then that was recognized and you were not treated any differently. It was really, really powerful to see that. I will try and cover it in maybe another presentation or at the end of this one. So homonormativity. So this is a little bit of a mixed bag. So this is the normalization of homosexuality as a perception or just the queer community at large. But there's different meanings to this. Homonormativity can also be a reference to excessive rebellion, I suppose you could say, against people who are either on the fence or definitely aren't sure if they should be supportive of the queer community in general. But for the most part, this would really just mean that it's a pursuit of trying to make sure that people are kept safe and that the LGBTQIA+ community is also brought to the mainstream and that it's not left behind, because if it is left behind, everyone else gets left behind. A hookup, this is very well known in the queer community for people who have got positive reception to sexuality. This is just a reference for a person who is interested in having casual sex without any strings attached. And there are quite a numerous amount of apps now available that have helped to facilitate this. It is a very, very lucrative and very prosperous industry, just like the gaming community, with the queer community also participating in it. Moving on to I, intersectional. Now, this is not to be confused with intersex. The spelling is in the name. So intersectional is to do with a broad width of study. And this incorporates as many things as you can think about. This would involve dynamics such as gender differences, equality differences in general. So this would be to do with one of the hot topics that we have nowadays is the equality of pay that we have between the sexes. So to stick to the binary code, that would be male and female, men and women, where women would usually get paid less, having to work more just to get paid the same. And even the maternity and paternity leave, the qualifications usually aren't brought in or enforced by law. You know, only paternity is granted, but only maternity is granted, but paternity is not. Differences of other things as well. So this would be to do with ethnic mixing. So we sort of have a study of intersectionality ourselves, and this absolutely deserves to be brought to the front because we are part of this culture, and that would be to do with our segregation of Catholics and Protestants, because here in Northern Ireland we have had a very, very memorable conflict between the religions, and whether or not people did take that seriously, because not an awful lot of people, or some people didn't take their religion seriously, and that meant that it was definitely a worthy candidate for this intersectionality study, because all it is referring to is the differences that you find, and it can be any differences at all. It can be negative, it can be positive, it can be lucrative, it can be innovative. So there we go, intersectionality. Intersex, now we've got onto it. So that symbol that you see there is the symbol for the intersex community, and it's a reference to, it's a, let me see here, it's a identity that people have, and it is usually ascribed to how they are born. So there are a multitude of factors that are in play. I can't remember them off the top of my head. As a matter of fact, I don't think I can even, remember any of them, but intersex is to do with how a person is usually born. So whenever a person is born intersex, then that means that they have got a combination of both male and female characteristics on either genitalia, and especially if they have not been affected by surgery, as they grow, then their not demeanor, but their physiological characteristics also seem to carry out the same phenomena where it's both male and female. So that's intersex. Not a very well protected community, because likened with our trans folks in the trans community, it also unfortunately falls under very rather discriminatory effects from our legislation that is being discussed in Westminster. Although in Stormont we're trying to have this resolved, but this is a vulnerable group within our community. I see you. Now, I can disclose a little bit about Avatar. You might have heard about that. I can't remember what the language was, but in Avatar, the big blockbuster movie with all the big tall blue people, one of the language references that they had was in their own language was "I see you," but what it actually meant was it either meant "I do see you," or it means "I see you so well I can see through you." That's how much I know you, and that's how much I love you. I can see right through you. "I see you" is used in the ball culture. In the ball culture, "I see you" means that it means two things. It means I see what you've done and it's very impressive. It's a compliment, in other words. "I see you" is also a reference for "I see you, so therefore you are not invisible." Because in the fight for equality, some people put in such a tremendous amount of effort, folks, that they just feel like as if they've been left out and are invisible. So "I see you" is definitely a very worthy phrase to help bring people out of that dark place. J, so we have a jock. A jock is a rather old term, and it's still used nowadays. It's a reference to anyone who identifies as male and is in the queer community as very athletic and muscular. So that's what a jock is. We have the J setting. J setting is, this is a very interesting one. So I really should give you a reference on that. Thank goodness I have this book. Yeah, here we are here. So it's a energized style of dance, and it was originated in the Black American culture, and it's now commonly used in the Black gay culture especially, and even the queer community at large. It's a formation of dancing. It uses energetic rhythmic movement and a structured group formations as well. Usually what they do is they settle themselves in a V formation, and that's how they carry out the dance. Judy. So a Judy is a personal gay best friend. So this is, if I'm not mistaken, this is also a male ascription. So a Judy is a male person who is in the queer community, and they are best friend to somebody who is also usually in the queer community. Moving on to K, kink. This is a very important one, and it's also thanks to the queer community. This is discussed more often. So kink involves quite a broad range of things. A kink is a pursuit of sexual stimulation that people really like and enjoy. And or even just romantic sometimes it can be. So as you can see in the photographs there is different ways of doing this. So some people like to be blindfolded, and this would be maybe a common thing in the BDSM and leather communities, which is the same thing. We have the bindings involved in there. So that little device that you see in that person's hands, that's a gag. So some people like to be restrained an awful lot as a pursuit of their stimulation. And another one that we have over there, I learned from the American crowd that I was involved in, is called squashing. So this is whenever you use food on your partner or partners as a pursuit of sexual interest, and it's a relatively popular thing for people to do. It can involve anything. It can involve syrups. It can involve your favorite foods, sauces, and what's another popular one? Cream. Yeah, that's another one. So there we go, kink. A kiki. This is a term I haven't heard of before, but it's used almost in the ballroom. And sorry, the ballroom culture, ball culture. A kiki is just an organization of people who want to talk about anything to do in the mainstream, usually the mainstream, or it can even be very serious. These are usually organized in a house setting, so somebody's house, or in a very well set up venue that would look like a house, so large tables, and is very on point for accommodating people's company. This is another big one, lavender. Lavender is a popular color in the queer community, and we have good reason to remember it's in our flag. The word lavender means an awful lot of things, and the word lavender would probably be most fondly recognized in the lavender scare, which is a phenomenon that happened in America, where people were being not just identified, but shunned, ousted, and persecuted for their sexuality because of the world power conflict between the two powers, America and the USSR. And they thought that the army of spies in the USSR, or the Red Army, would be able to manipulate and coerce members of the queer community more easily. So this was a phenomenon where people who were queer were identified as a liability, and they were persecuted, tracked, and removed from the main industries. It caused a real hampering on people's livelihoods for people who were just trying to work. The picture that you see up there in the top right, so that's just a rainbow tongue. So tongue is just another word for language. And in the book, it's also referenced a word called the lavender linguistics. And that's exactly what we're doing here in this presentation. Lavender linguistics is the study of queer language. So thank you all for coming here and learning with me. Continuing with L, we have label. So this has got two meanings. So whenever we are talking about the queer community at large, so if someone is being labeled by somebody else, that's usually a taboo thing, because we should definitely know better as a society at large never to label other people. But whenever you label yourself, then that is a pursuit of your identity, because you're trying to find out what fits. So there we go, that's label. Lesbian, part of our acronym of LGBTQIA+, lesbian, there's the flag that belongs to them as well. A lesbian is a person who is female or identifies as female and is sexually attracted to the same gender as themselves. This is, of course, female. So that is what lesbian means. A tribe that does belong to lesbians that I am aware of is called lipstick lesbians. So these are women or female identifying individuals who dress very, very well and like to have very prominent, almost feminine expectations of their dress. And they are just as any other lesbian attracted to other lesbians, other females. And LGBTQIA+, so there we are. That's our very, very big acronym, and it involves an awful lot of things. This can be abbreviated or not abbreviated. There are other words for LGBTQIA+. The big acronym, of course, means lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, and asexual. Now, on a personal note, I won't mind saying this. I definitely don't mind the allies of us to be involved in the acronym as well, even though the book and a few other people would definitely say no, they do not belong. I don't think that's quite as inclusive, especially if you have support coming from such people. Another word that you can have for LGBTQIA is just family. Like I had mentioned before in the F section slide, family just means rainbow family or rainbow community. That's all it means. We have library. So this is a term in the ball culture. So this is where we get the phrase, the library is open, as in someone is actively, intelligently, and witfully slandering and insulting another person. So it's a hypercritique, and it's done usually very, very quickly. That's what the term the library is open stands for. Maybe if we were to delve in our own culture a little bit, this is where we would have a phrase emerge soon of, do you want to go to the library? As in, do you want to start? That's probably what that would be translated as. But okay, this is a dated term, so it's not used very much, but it's, as far as I'm aware, is not offensive. Light in the loafers is a polarity term that's used to describe a usually gay man who might have, who is gay, sorry. So this would be a gay man. And the term that would be used for light in the loafers. So if you were describing someone saying, like, look at that person over there, I think they're light in the loafers, I'm not sure. That means that you think that they're gay, but you're not sure. Okay.
Nigel, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm so impressed by the depth of research. I'm sure we all are. The only thing is we probably need to leave a little bit of time just for people to maybe ask questions and comments. So if that's okay, do you mind if you maybe stop sharing your screen and we'll have a wee bit of a discussion? Is that okay? I'm so sorry.
Oh no, I'm sort of sorry too, because
no, you've done so much research, so it's fantastic. It's like listening to a dictionary.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what it is. It's a queer dictionary.
Yeah.
Where that is from.
No, so thank you so much. I'm sure, as I say,
thank you, folks. I wish I had more time, but we need to leave time for you as well.
Well, listen, I mean, as I'm sure, as I say, I speak on everyone's behalf just to say how impressed we are by the depth of research and the amount of effort, even the pictures that you've chosen. And I know there's so many terms I've never heard before, so you've clearly done your research. I just want to open it up to everyone. in terms of if you have any comments or particular questions for Nigel. Maybe there were words that he highlighted that you'd never heard before that you might want to comment on. So you can put your comments in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, by all means you can, if you want to ask something to Nigel. Mary Ellen, do you want to ask something or make a comment?
I'd like to make a comment and a suggestion, depending on what everybody thinks. But I find this totally fascinating. I've actually been sitting writing words down because I've learned so much.
And we're not finished yet.
Because we've only got up to the end here, I'm wondering, should we cut this presentation in two and ask Nigel back to complete the rest on another day? Yeah. What do people think about that? Yes, Kirsty's agreeing with me.
There's a number of comments in the chat. Karen says.
Yeah.
Kathleen asks, Nigel, what was the name of the book?
The name of the book, I have it right here. So this is the book that I had very fortunately had the information to know about from a webinar from the American crowd that I was involved in. It's called The Queen's English, very well termed book, if you ask me. And on the inside, I actually really enjoyed the book every time I turned over a page, because if you have, let me see here, I need to position myself properly. There we are. So this is actually a very, very colorful book, and it has multiple different references to different aspects of the queer community. So the training that I got from Ren McQuicken, whenever I was in lockdown on gender identity training, involved a concept called the genderbread person, and this is involved in this book, and that's to do with people's exploration of their gender expression, gender identity, sexual attraction, and romantic attraction, a few other things as well. So if it's not, what do you call it? There's charts involved in this to describe things like there's an awful lot of male ascriptions in here, and it's to do with male terminology. So we have so we had bears that I mentioned at the start of the presentation. We have other aspects as well, like pups, otters. Who else is involved? We have polar bears. What do you call it? I'm trying to remember the lesbian community as well. There's an awful lot of female and lesbian, especially lesbian terminology in here as well. So we have the butch that I have mentioned. We have the dyke. We have the phenomenon as well mentioned in this book called dykes on bikes, which is a reclamation term and movement done in America exclusively by lesbians to try and raise awareness and to let them know that they are out and proud in Pride. So there's actually lots and lots of information. I would even go as far to say that this book belongs in every household, because now that we are becoming intensively more aware of how sensitive we should be to people's sexual development especially, that book would come in very handy as a reference for helping people to understand and explore. So The Queen's English by Chloe O. Davis and Paula Akpan. There we are. That's the authors down there. Oh, hang on a second. There we are.
Yeah, I can see
I've actually checked. It's available on Amazon in case anybody's interested.
Yes, that's exactly where I got it from. So that would be a good place to go and get it. It's around, oh, what is it? About 18-20 pounds.
It's on offer at the moment. 20% off. Must have known we were doing this. Any other comments or questions?
There was a few people that had their hands up.
Michael's turn, sorry. I'd shut up again.
Yeah, no, anybody else want to ask any questions or comments, or I think it'll be great. Nigel, I don't think we've ever had a two-parter. Oh, Gareth, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I just thought, thank you very much. That was great. And I think the terminology that's used there's a lot of fun terms out there. Yes. I had a little tiny small book. It's called Gay Slang. I don't know if anybody can see that. But most of it couldn't be repeated because it's kind of racy, but there's a lot of funny things, like terms that maybe people would use locally here, like confirmed bachelor as a euphemism for a gay man. There's even one, I don't know if anybody's heard of it, potato queen. That's somebody who has a preference for Irish men. I just love the way people come up with these terms in a very sort of humorous sort of a way. But again, I think the roots come from underground. And do you have any idea, or anybody have any ideas about, why this language developed? Was it like a code, or was it a way with dealing with oppression, or was it it's fascinating.
Is Martin still here?
Yeah, I'm still here. I've just got a book there recently, Babylusa, which is a guy at North by Parker, and it's more about Polari. And it's although I really enjoyed this one tonight, I thought it was very interesting. The Polari is more about what's happened in the culture, maybe in England and London, going back maybe 30 or 40 years ago. And it's like you think about the Friends of Dorothy or Bona, which would mean good.
Yes.
Naff would be another big word would have been used in the gay culture. If anybody of these would remember, maybe the older people, Kenneth Williams, and there was another character who was very, very prominent in doing it. And I don't mean to be offensive here, but when I'm going back about 35 years ago when I went out first to Edinburgh and London, a lot of the old, usually in the afternoon, there were a lot of being drag queens and stuff in the thing. So there's a lot of talk and language. And I remember going there and being a young Irish boy, probably 35 years ago, thinking, geez, what's this? I thought it was a different language, but it was a gay language that they were using in London. Just like, are you a friend of Dorothy's? Are you whatever? The Boston marriage was like I remember that there was amazing. Because I remember I was always a big fan of Little House on the Prairie. When I found out that Grandma and Granddad were both gay in real life, I thought, whoa. And the Grandma was in the Boston marriage. And then about the bathhouses, like that would be a big thing in America. But I remember Bette Midler, that's how she started off her career. Because in the bathhouses and that stage, there would have been a lot of entertainment as well. I suppose changed a lot then through the AIDS epidemic and stuff like that there in the States. But a lot of people, entertainers, would have started off their career in the bathhouses.
Yes.
Initially. So I think it was great tonight, and I loved all that stuff there. And the Boston marriage kind of brought memories of a kind of the illusion a bit of Grandma and Walton's there a bit. I thought she was wholesome family, just all these kids. She was quite a character. I think she was a chain smoker and swore like a trooper, but very different to her character. And the grandpa would have been a great gay rights activist as well, and a great union man. So it's funny how things you learn. I enjoyed it, really, have to say, tonight. Some of the words and some of the stuff there. A lot of them I knew, a lot I didn't know. So really have to thank you. It was really interesting. But the book's really good as well. It talks about all the culture, maybe probably around the maybe 60s onwards in London when it was still illegal to be part of with them being the gay community or the LGBT community, those stages. So they obviously had to have their own secret language, and that's how it came about. That's how it started, basically. And it was used as well by not just gay people, circus people and actors. So it was all that kind of theatrical people who started off in the Polari talking. So that's how it all came about. So in the UK anyway, and Ireland, I suppose.
Jill, would you like to ask something or make a comment?
Yes, thank you. Just like to say thank you to Nigel. I thought I knew it all and wasn't sure I was going to learn anything tonight, but yeah, definitely did. But I think you've definitely got enough there for 2 sessions, or you can maybe cut out some of the more common terms that people would probably know if you're working with the LGBT plus community. But it's definitely a very fun and enjoyable session. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thanks, Jill. Grania.
Hi, thanks, Nigel. I'm just going to pick up on what Martin was saying. Even in The Little House on the Prairie, the actress who played Nellie Olson, her on-screen husband was a gay man, and he died of AIDS. She actually helped nurse him, and also she ended up being a prominent AIDS activist, especially around children in America. But the other thing is, Polari is also related to the traveller community or the stroke gypsy community. So there's a connection. It was actually adopted by the gay men from the community. So the two of them, because obviously travellers, gypsies, and then the circus were all intermingled. And of course, the gay men then became a deviant culture or whatever, and that got put in the mix as well. But as Martin was saying, it was Sandy and Julian was the radio act in the 60s that did all Kenneth Williams, who brought on all Polari. I
Yes,
have this book.
they popularized Polari. Yes.
Yeah, I have this book called It's Not Unusual. And
Mm.
it's a friend of mine left it when they went to New Zealand. And it's mostly about the gay men and their culture. But it talks about the whole Sandy and Julie and the Polari and what it was like right up to, I think, Quentin Crisp is mentioned in it and stuff as well. I mean, when I came out first, you were saying about the gay gals. Well, when I came out first, the gay men called themselves sisters.
Mhm.
And there was never everything is anything as good sisters. But thing was, there was no incest between them because God forbid, you know, it was like they were sisters and that was it. There was nothing else allowed to be involved in that. But yeah, but a lot of this stuff was I remember being down in the Maverick one night, handing out, I volunteer with the Rainbow Project, handing out condoms to one of the couple of fellas at a table. And I was chatting to them and I said to them, are you two sisters or are you together? And they looked at me like I had 20 heads, because obviously that phrase sisters has died off a death within the gay scene in Belfast. And unless Gareth has heard it recently, or Martin even.
That's
I
great.
think we used the royal family quite a lot in Derry, and there was 3 royal families, 3 different sets of groups, and they would all call themselves sister, and then princess this and princess that. But again, sisters in the royal families, 3 different royal families in Derry. Probably go back to the late 70s, early 80s. Very common knowledge and very common words used then, which were really interesting.
Okay, can I just jump in and just remind everybody about the evaluation? I've put the link in the chat box, just in case anybody is jumping out. I'm actually going to stop you at the moment and knock the recording off if you don't mind, and we can then continue afterwards. So thank you all for attending tonight. Thank you, Nigel, for your presentation, and hopefully we'll see you again next month. So I'm just going to knock the recording off.